Tonight in Syracuse, Elton John was rocking out in the JMA Wireless Dome, so it may make you think, where was Syracuse football? The Orange were in East Hartford, where they rocked UConn by a final of 48-14 at Pratt Whitney Stadium. Tonight on Orange Press Pass, we'll talk about how Cuse got it done, what adjustments it made from week 1 to week 2, and a whole lot more. It's OPP, and it starts right now. Hello and welcome inside the CitrusTV Studios for another edition of Orange Press Pass alongside Anthony Vasquez and Jared Johnston. I'm Trey Redfield. So Anthony, the Orange get it done. 48-14 the final against the UConn Huskies in East Hartford tonight. What's the first thought that's going through your mind right now?
Well, this was an expected win. Syracuse came in 24-point favorites over the poor UConn Huskies. This is a UConn football team that's been down as of late. First-year head coach in Jim Moore, and the fact that they put a stomping on UConn and got out of it healthy, it's really important.
What was huge is the offense, Anthony. You mentioned it, but obviously a cohesive effort. 10 different receivers that were on the ball. Damian Alford, the leading receiver, only one haul in for a 47-yard TD. That's huge for this offensive unit going forward.
Alford, the leading receiver in the 34-point win for the Orange. Let's see how it all went down at Rensselaer Field. The Orange and Huskies going at it for the first time since 2018. That man, Dino Babers and company, looking for Syracuse's first road win of the season. Let's take it late to the first quarter. Syracuse already up 10-0, but we mentioned Damian Alford, Anthony. This is his only reception today.
Boy, that was a dot right there by Garrett Schrader, going over the middle, showing off the arm strength with the right arm.
Second quarter now after the Syracuse drive. UConn answered immediately. Jared, it was Devontae Houston on the ground.
Yeah, and he only had a few carries, but when he was able to find some daylight, that Syracuse defense let him through.
10 minutes later, right before going into the halftime locker room, Anthony, it was Courtney Jackson over the middle making the grab and getting it in for 6.
And Garrett Schrader tossing it over the linebacker, showing the arm strength once again, threading the needle.
Syracuse up 27-7 at halftime, but thanks to Garrett Schrader on the ground. Check that, Sean Tucker. Jared, simple as that. You got to go to 34, right?
It wouldn't be Syracuse football without a Sean Tucker score, and all the yards that he put on. Sean Tucker is the lifeblood of this team.
Later in that quarter, on a screen pass, the defense gets burned. Anthony, this time it's Aaron Turner.
One of the few busted plays we've seen from Syracuse. They were going all-out blitz, no safety help. Perfect play call from Jim Moore to call the screen pass for the TD.
4 minutes later, Garrett Schrader calls his own name. Jared, this was one of 5 total touchdowns today from QB1.
And this is exactly what you expect from Garrett Schrader when he's finally been able to refine his passing game. It gives him the options to use his feet as well.
And then icing on the cake in the fourth quarter, Anthony, DeMarcus Adams, 39 yards out, his first touchdown in Syracuse Orange.
And how about that? Welcome to Cuse. Adams right there with the garbage time score, but it's still huge for any newcomer on Syracuse to break into the game.
Adams coming from Florida Atlantic, and it's Syracuse that grabs the 48-14 victory in East Adams. I mean, you see Garrett Schrader's stat line right there. Sean Tucker as well, over 100 yards. The offense and the defense clicking on all cylinders tonight, guys.
It was a complete team win today for the Cuse. We saw Garrett Schrader, look at that completion percentage, 20 for 23, his highest completion percentage over his 4-year career at Mississippi State and Cuse.
And this is the first time he's thrown for 200-plus yards in back-to-back games in his collegiate career. It's finally being put together.
Now let's take it into East Hartford, where John Dale stands by at Rensselaer Field. John, it was a big win for the Orange. How did the away crowd influence the SU win?
Well, Trey, you're certainly right about it being a big win for the Orange. I'll also tell you this, you talked about the crowd. It was really unbelievable. The Syracuse fans that made the trip out here to cheer on the Cuse, right from the beginning, right from when the teams took the field before the game, there was such a loud cheer from this near sideline from all the Syracuse fans. It drowned out the boos that they received from the UConn faithful. And look, there were plenty of UConn fans here tonight as well. That student section was packed. They just didn't have anything to cheer about. So give a ton of credit to the Syracuse fans that made the trip. They were loud all game.
Well, John, I'll give you something that Syracuse fans can cheer about. The defense. What was your biggest takeaway from that tonight, and how can they use that in the next week's game against Purdue?
You're right about that, Anthony. The defense was unbelievable today as well. And My biggest takeaway from the defensive performance we saw tonight is that Syracuse is going to be just fine without Stefan Thompson going forward. And that was a big question mark going into this game. Maybe it wouldn't reveal itself against UConn because the Huskies aren't the greatest football team in the world. And yes, Purdue's going to be a much bigger challenge. But the way that Syracuse was gang tackling this evening, the way that they were even just covering every single kick, I think it took a step or two out of every single player on the UConn side. So just the physicality that Syracuse brought, Dino Babers mentioned that after the game as well. It's got to give a lot of hope to Syracuse fans. And yes, Purdue is a team that has scored plenty of points. Look, they hung up 56 on Larry Bird's alma mater today, but I think that Syracuse's defense is going to come ready for Saturday.
On the defense, putting all the pieces together, but you look at this offensive team now, 10 different receivers on the ball. It seems like there are plenty of players gelling. Which receiver surprised you most in this effort?
Well, Jared, I'll give you two answers here. I was really surprised that Max Maying had a catch. It was only a 6-yard reception, but that's a tight end wearing a Syracuse jersey and making a catch on the football field. That's something that pretty much never happens. And I'll give you another one. DeMarcus Adams, a transfer out of FAU from last year. Last season with FAU, he had 2 catches the entire season. This year, with Syracuse, in this game, he comes in and makes a 39-yard touchdown catch. That was right after that muff punt. Schrader going down the field to him. So that's got to be a pretty good sign for Syracuse fans that Schrader doesn't just trust in his main guys. He can also go further down the depth chart at wide receiver. So those 2 guys, even just making the 1 catch each, I was really surprised by.
John Dale is joining us from East Hartford after the 48-14 win for Syracuse over UConn. John, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks so much for all your coverage today against the Orange and the Huskies. We still have a lot more to come on Orange Press Pass. When we come back, we're going to dissect this win a little bit more for the Cuse. Talk a little bit about Garrett Schrader, a lot more about the penalties, and the turnovers coming through defensively for the Cuse, but also limiting them on offense as well. OPP rolls on after this.
Here's to the straggly ones, the first ones. Hey, I look good with this ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. The itchy ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The I nearly didn't do it this year ones. And the absolutely filthy ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.com.
Welcome back to Orange Press Pass. Anthony Vasquez, Jared Johnston, Trey Redfield. Syracuse taking down UConn in dominant fashion by a final of 48-14. And guys, let's talk a little bit more about this win. Dissect how the Orange got it done. Anthony, we're going to start with you, and it begins with QB1. What did you see from Garrett Schrader tonight that made him look so successful?
Well, I saw Garrett Schrader pick up exactly right where he left off in the passing game. 20 for 23, like I mentioned earlier, that completion percentage, the highest completion percentage of his career, and over 10 yards per completion. Garrett Schrader was absolutely amazing tonight.
I think the biggest thing is the decision making that you've seen. The offensive coordinator, Rob Benai, is trusting Garrett Schrader with the passing game. He put the work in the offseason, and it's really finally gelling all together. Ultimately, having him to use the weapon of his arm will only complement the run game going forward with Tucker as well.
Schrader keeping the good times rolling offensively for the Orange. But one thing that sticks out in the miscellaneous section that you see on box scores, the penalties completely reduced, definitely in comparison to last week's win, against Louisville. 18 penalties yesterday. Anthony, that number much lower today.
That's right. The majority of those penalties against Louisville, were pre-snap penalties. Those are the type of things where it's all coaching, essentially. And today, they were all wiped clean. Very few penalties today from Syracuse. They looked fantastic today. As you mentioned, you see on that graphic, 18 penalties for 148 yards, the most in school history. It was a much better day for the Qs.
Yeah, 18 last week. That broke the program record that they set against UAlbany the season prior. And so with that, an immediate response, discipline, they took 2 penalties towards the end of the first half, but really after that, smooth sailing, tacking on only 1, like you mentioned, Trey. That's exactly what you want to see discipline-wise for an Orange side heading into a tune-up against Purdue, obviously.
18 last week. 3 penalties this week against UConn. And getting more into this win for the Orange, you got to look into the turnovers as well. Marlo Wax forced a big turnover on the fumble. I mean, just going a little bit more into it. Also offensively, no turnovers on their end. How important is that, Jared, to keep those numbers up defensively, but limit them offensively?
Oh, it's huge. Obviously protecting the ball on the offensive end, but I think you can't look at Syracuse right now without talking about how amazing this defense has been. I mean, Mikel Jones, after the punt was made on going the other way, basically forced the fumble, went into the end zone. That was one of the most fantastic plays I've seen out of this Syracuse defense, getting in on special teams as well. But going forward to the offensive side of things, I mean, the more they protect the ball, gives them a huge chance going forward, especially into a more competitive ACC slate.
Well, that's right. The Qs aren't in their meat of its schedule quite yet. You still have to play Clemson. You still have to play NC State, Pitt, Florida State. 3 of those 4 teams are ranked. Heck, even Notre Dame is on that list on the schedule. And anytime you can steal those possessions and give the offense a short field, it's going to be huge.
Let's go back to Garrett Schrader, and rightfully so. QB1 is our Orange Press Pass Player of the Game. Schrader had himself 287 passing yards with 3 touchdowns. Also, he did it on the ground because that's just simply what Schrader does. He had 2 touchdowns with the rush. He had himself a QB sneak, and then you saw in the highlights he had that rushing score as well in the 3rd quarter. But 5 total touchdowns today from Garrett Schrader. He is our Orange Press Pass Player of the Game. When we come back on OPP, we're going to play a little game. We're going to have some fun. Anthony and Jared are going to get factual or maybe even fraudulent. Fact or fraud is coming up on the other side here on Orange Press Pass.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Shifting over to the wall inside our Citrus TV studios as we bring on some more Orange Press Pass with Anthony Vasquez and Jared Johnson. I'm Trey Redfield. It's the Orange that took down the UConn Huskies by a score of 48-14 tonight in East Hartford. It's Cuse that improves to 2-0 on the season. But guys, it's time to play a game. It's called Fact or Fraud. It's very simple. I'm going to give you guys a statement, and if you agree with it, you're going to say, okay, that's a fact. But if you don't like it, disagree with it, want to throw it out the window, then you say it is a fraud. You guys ready to do this thing?
Let's do it.
All right, Anthony, I'm going to start with you. Very simple. A lot of talk about Garrett Schrader tonight, and rightfully so. I mean, he had 5 total touchdowns today. He's the Orange Press Pass player of the game as well. Anthony, is QB1 legit?
I think QB1 is legit. That is 100% factual. I think Coach Jason Beck and Coach and I have really fixed Garrett Schrader. When it comes to the passing game, it looks a lot more fluid. The right arm is a lot. The throwing motion rather is a lot better.
I'll double down on it, Anthony. Fact for Garrett Schrader. I mean, this Syracuse offense is just absolutely running on all cylinders. And you look at what they've been able to do. I think the passing game is huge because of the trust. I think that's the key word for the Syracuse offense. Garrett Schrader wasn't trusted to throw the ball last year, whether he was able to or whether he wasn't, and that's the biggest change.
And now we go from Schrader to Sean Tucker, QB1 to RB1. Tucker had himself 112 yards tonight with 1 touchdown. Jared, we're going to start with you about Tucker. This is the statement. You ready?
Yeah.
Sean Tucker, another 1,000-yard season. Fact or fraud?
Fact, and of course it has to be, but ultimately when we look at it, I think that with the passing game that has really been supplemented lately, I think Tucker won't have the season he had last year. He'll still surpass 1,000 yards. But it will be seen as more of a compliment to the passing game and trying to play against these tough ACC opponents. I mean, Tucker was basically the engine of this SU offense. He would make up the bulk of the yards, and Garrett Schrader didn't really throw the ball that much at all, or whether it was Tommy DeVito early on. So Tucker will still be there, of course.
I agree with you, Jared. Barring an unforeseen injury to RB1, I think Sean Tucker will easily eclipse that 1K mark. The schedule favors him the rest of the way, and especially if Coach and I is going to give him the ball, it should favor him.
Talk a lot about offense. It wins games, but defense wins championships, guys, and it was the Orange that held the Huskies to 14 points tonight. Also had themselves 2 turnovers. Halfway through fact and fraud, Anthony, we're going to start off with you. Syracuse has the 2nd best defense in the ACC. Fact or fraud? Go.
I'm going to have to say a fraud. I'm going to have to buck the trend of fact and say fraud, just because look at the rest of the ACC defensively. You have Clemson, who's one of the best defensive teams in the nation. NC State is there as well. Heck, even Florida State or even a non-conference foe in Notre Dame, even though they're not in the ACC, they could still prove trouble for Syracuse. So I'm saying not quite a top 2 or 3 defense.
This Syracuse team that I think is going to surprise a lot of people. So I say fact for this Syracuse team to be one of the top defenses in the ACC. And let me tell you why. When they're playing a lot of these ranked opponents, when they're playing Clemson, sure, the Tigers may have a better defense. But this is a team that, with the defense, can upset Purdue next week and do plenty of other things as well.
So we talked about the offense, talked about the defense. Now let's go into the schedule. This is the big one. You guys were excited for this one when we talked about playing fact or fraud before the show. Jared, it begins with you. You're about to have one of the hottest takes of the century. I hope you guys are ready. Jared, here we go. Syracuse will start the season 6-0. Fact or fraud?
Fact.
Wow.
Syracuse will start the season 6-0. They're going to turn a lot of heads doing so. And I mentioned it in the last fact that I just said, that the Syracuse defense will be one of the top defenses in the ACC. That will be the guiding light for head coach Dina Babers. But along with that, Garrett Schrader's been guiding this offense as well. If this team can continually get yards on the ground and get yards through the air, I think they go upset NC State and they go play Clemson and they say, all right, we're sitting fine and dandy at 6-0.
Well, that's where I'm going to stop you right there, Jared. They'll probably beat Virginia. They'll definitely beat Wagner. Okay. But you got to place Purdue. Sure. Aiden O'Connell and Jeff Brom.
They'll get them.
Tough Purdue team.
That's a win.
Then you have to place top 25 NC State, Devin Leary, Coach Dave Doran, what they're doing down there in Raleigh is pretty good.
Last time around, though.
And I just don't see it, Jared, right now. I mean, you're probably going to be underdogs against Purdue, underdogs against NC State. You're telling me they're going to go 6-0?
Yes.
Okay. Nope.
You guys are bringing all the positivity, but what's the deal shooting out with the negativity, Anthony? Come on, man. But that was fact and fraud. We hope you guys enjoyed it. And Orange Press Pass still rolls on. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the ACC, figure out what went on around the Atlantic Coast Conference, take a look at the standings, and see who's next up for the Orange. It's a Big Ten opponent in Purdue. OPP rolls on after this.
OTN is on all your favorite apps: Apple TV, Fire TV, and Roku. Search Orange Television Network or OTN. OTN has its best shows, short films, and Citrus TV on demand. Family and friends can watch OTN too. Watch the live stream of OTN to catch live Citrus TV news, live from Studio B, and mornings on the Hill. On or off campus, watch OTN anywhere.
Welcome back to Orange Press Pass with Anthony Vasquez and Jared Johnson. I'm Trey Redfield. Syracuse taking down UConn 48-14 tonight in East Hartford if you're just joining us. But guys, there was a lot more activity in the ACC. A great week of college football. So with that, let's take a look around the Atlantic Coast Conference. A couple of upsets today. I mean, we saw App State take down 6th-ranked Texas A&M. Anthony, the ACC had an upset of its own. 24th-ranked Tennessee going into the Steel City, taking down 17th-ranked Pitt.
Well, Trey, I'm not too sure if that was an upset. Tennessee came into that one 6-point favorites, and the Vols, they could surprise some people in the SEC rather. So Tennessee looked very good today. Hendon Hooker was throwing the ball around, and for Pittsburgh, it was a tough day for the quarterback Keaton Slovis. He got hurt at halftime, and their backup did not really torch the Tennessee defense, so I like the Vols.
And Anthony, we look at another matchup. Lest we forget Phil Jurkovec after being injured last season. BC on a down year. They lose by a few scores to Virginia Tech. So BT, a tough team, but for Boston College, you're expecting a lot more from Phil Jurkovec. Maybe just making sure that he's not a bit too rusty after his first game back.
There's one score that you didn't see on there. It was Virginia that fell to Illinois 24-3. So talk about Tommy DeVito taking down the Cavaliers and a future opponent. But now let's take a look at the ACC standings. Syracuse in second place, Jared. How about it? Just right behind 5th-ranked Clemson. That's going to put a smile on your face if you're an Orange fan, obviously.
I mean, for everyone tuning in the last block, I think they're going to go 6-0. So double down, double down, right. Double your money with Beat the Bookie or anything on our Citrus TV programs. But absolutely, this is a Syracuse team that's starting out strong, and I don't see why they cannot stay up there. Obviously, they're playing a lot of the teams below them later on in the schedule, but they're only going to build more momentum as the season goes on.
All right, well, you're saying they're going to finish top 2 in the ACC, going to the college
top 2
football
defense
playoff,
was
going
that.
to the national championship. Pushing that aside, I think it's an okay opinion to think they'll finish in the top half of the ACC Atlantic Division. Boston College didn't look very good today, losing 27-10 to Vaught Tech. Louisville didn't look very good against Syracuse, of course, and then Wake Forest and NC State. You still have to play them if you're the Qs, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and you go all the way to the bottom. Trey, you mentioned earlier with the UVA match where they lost to Illinois. Tommy DeVito, the former Syracuse Orange quarterback, had himself a day. 17 for 25 with 2 TDs, and Brennan Armstrong, without his coach, Robert and I, not necessarily running and gunning with the offense at all.
The Atlantic Division should be a ton of fun in the ACC. 3 ranked opponents. If Syracuse can find its groove, the one that you're dreaming about, then maybe the Orange can join in on that party. But first, they got to take down Purdue, another Big Ten foe for Syracuse. Last year, it was the loss against Rutgers, but now you're taking on the Boilermakers. Anthony, how do you see this matchup going against these two?
Well, you already know the Purdue Boilermakers are going to come in hungry. Aiden O'Connell's going to be tossing the ball around, and Jeff Brom's going to have his team prepared. This is a Purdue team that's always pulls that one upset in the Big Ten, whether it's Ohio State coming to town or Iowa or Penn State. This Purdue team is probably for real right now, so it'll be a tough one.
And this is a Purdue team that's going to have a really tough job against the Syracuse defense. And Mikel Jones-led and Garrett Williams-led juggernaut defense that really seems to be in a groove right now. And like you mentioned, that Purdue can air the ball out. Ultimately, I think this Syracuse defense is just going to be sniffing out more turnovers as they have in these first 2 games.
And as always, Citrus TV will have you covered for Syracuse and Purdue. Orange Press Pass will be next Saturday at 5 o'clock between the Boilermakers and the Orange. But there's still more to come here on OPP. When we come back, Anthony and Jared are going to give their final thoughts on SU's 48-14 win over UConn. Keep it here. OPP continues on OTN.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Most party fouls are pretty dumb. But if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Underage drinking and driving. The ultimate party foul.
Closing up shop here on Orange Press Pass after a dominant Syracuse win. The Orange taking down the UConn Huskies by a final of 48-14. Anthony Vasquez, Jared Johnson, and myself, Trey Redfield, we got to see it all right here inside of our Citrus TV studios. But guys, it's time to say so long. So Anthony, I'm going to toss it over to you. What are your final thoughts after SU's second win of the season?
Well, Trey, I know we're only 2 games into the season, but I'm willing to say that Syracuse is for real. And dare I say, do they go bowling? They'll be 4-2, I think. Maybe not Jared, but I think they'll probably be 4-2 or 5-1 after 6 games, and that'll set them up, put them in the driver's seat for bowl eligibility. So I'm all in on the Syracuse team, and I think you are too.
Anthony, you said that they're for real. I think they're more than for real. I think this is the best Syracuse football team in the Dino Babers era. Remember 2018?
I do. Remember it like it was yesterday.
Camping World Bowl, right? Eric Dungy. I think Garrett Schrader in this offense has more potential to run and be coexistent with this defense. I think that they can go past the Camping World Bowl. I think they can go past all that.
So you're calling a better bowl game, maybe like an Outback Bowl or a New Year's Six Bowl, dare you say?
Down in Ray J,
do you have a final record for Syracuse?
I could conservatively say that they went 10-3 in 2018. You want me to say they're going 11-2?
Wow.
Wow. Go down the schedule. Go down the schedule.
This is Jared Johnson saying Syracuse football is going to be as good as they are.
They'll beat Purdue.
With NC State, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Pitt, and Wake Forest all in the schedule?
6-0 going into Clemson, going to Death Valley.
Wow.
From there, maybe you drop that, but you go down. Look at FSU.
Maybe.
Look at FSU.
Be nice and say the
matchup against FSU, the matchup against Wake Forest,
Notre Dame.
Those matchups, all of those before. When you look at last season, they were so close to eking out those results, and they barely had the team they had this season.
And you look at the standings right now. I mean, we talked about it just a few moments ago. If Jared's dream comes true, Syracuse can really make this interesting along to other teams in this conference and this division in general with NC State and Wake Forest. It's a gauntlet of a schedule coming up. You know that, right, Jared? I'm just making sure you know that.
Yes, but I think that a lot of these teams are suffering really easy losses early on. And this defense, I keep harping on it, but I honestly think that generating all the turnovers that they have and the ball security that Syracuse has had, mind you, they had a ton of turnovers and a ton of penalties last season.
So it's Syracuse that comes through in a 48-14 win over UConn in East Hartford. Next time you'll see Orange Press Pass, it is next Saturday at 5 o'clock following the conclusion of Syracuse and Purdue inside the JMA Wireless Dome. That wraps it up here on OPP. For Anthony Vasquez and Jared Johnson, I'm Trey Redfield saying so long after a dominant 34-point win for the Orange. Have a great night, everybody.